What's up, everybody? It is Pikel with League of Items, and today we are going to discuss NBA DFS. Now, most of you are watching this video because I'm probably the smartest League of Legends DFS guy out there. And, you know,
And most humble.
Yes, I don't say that about myself. Other people say it about me. I get that message all the time. You know, I wouldn't just come up with that kind of phrase for myself. However, I also love basketball. I love the NBA. I don't love the Knicks as much anymore, but the NBA is great. A few years ago, I was working a desk job, and DraftKings sent me an email saying, "Hey, you haven't been playing DraftKings much recently. Would you like to play in a free contest for the NBA?" And I said, yes, I would love to. So then I built a Carmelo Anthony stack with Kristaps Porzingis and a bunch of random Nuggets players, and I hit. And then, Darren Collison and Ben McLemore both scored like 40 or 50 points against the Hawks. Look at that, Chris. And so I won like thousands of dollars off of a basketball thing that I didn't even pay any attention to, and I've been playing a little bit of NBA DFS ever since. So when the coronavirus happened, obviously no basketball, I was all in on League of Legends. But now that basketball is back, I decided it's time to broaden our horizons and share the good word about NBA DFS with all of you. And to do that, I've brought in reinforcements. So this is Chris. Chris is the second half of the what we're calling Ball In DFS video series, or podcast, or some phrase. But that's up for you to decide. But again, this is Chris. So Chris, please explain to us what you know about basketball, if anything.
It's the one with the round orange thing, right?
No, you're thinking of football.
Yeah, right. My name is Chris. I've been a basketball fan since 2005 when I started following the Hawks because I didn't want to be a bandwagon fan. And Marvin Williams was going to be the next great thing out of North Carolina. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. Yes, I don't have nearly the same accolades in the DFS world that Michael does to flex with, so I'm sort of just standing close to him for his body heat in that sense. But yeah, I've been a big basketball fan for a while. Also, more than that, I'm a big numbers fan. Pretty much whenever I play a sports video game, I just play franchise mode so I can just simulate things and be the couch GM kind of guy, running through all the stats, enjoying all that stuff. I like to count my footsteps. I like to add license plates.
Tell him the serial killer thing. Tell him the serial killer thing with the license plates. That's fun.
I don't know. It's like I said, it's not a compulsion, but for 15 years or so now, whenever I see a license plate, I just add all the numbers together. Each letter counts as 5, with zeros essentially working the same as O's, which are also 5s. I like to count my footsteps.
Do you count other people's footsteps?
On occasion, but they're not nearly as consistent as I am, so it kind of bores me. There's got to be a rhythm to it. They're stepping on cracks and things, which throws the numbers of everything off. So it's sort of more of a me thing. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about basketball and learn some of this jargon that Mike's gonna be slanging around in no time at all. So will I.
Great.
With that being said, let's get into the first game of the slate that we're talking about today. It's actually going to be from that first night, Clippers-Lakers. And I've got to say, aside from the fact that Lou Williams was spotted just yesterday at a strip club, which I imagine would rule him out of this game, I'm very high on Reggie Jackson. Pump some of that right in because the way I'm looking at the Clippers lineup right now, I'm only seeing it looks like 2 people that might actually play that qualify as guards in Reggie Jackson and Rodney McGruder. And with Jackson coming in at $4,600, and it seems like a lot of opportunity just to sort of fill minutes and fill shots, I really like his upside there.
It's not the worst first take I've ever heard in my life.
The nicest thing you ever said to me.
Probably. So who else do you have from that game?
From that game, just looking at the pricing, it feels to me like Paul George is really low. I'm not sure if he's going to be on a minutes limit or what.
Yeah.
But just sort of comparing him, I get it. LeBron 10-7, Anthony Davis 10 flat, Kawhi 9,200, Paul George 2,000 less at 7,200. I get that he averages less, but like I said, with so few guys that aren't infected with COVID and have a pulse on the Clippers, the scoring's got to come from somewhere. I understand that this, there isn't a ton on the line here with the Lakers being 5.5 games ahead of the Clippers with only 8 to play.
Yeah.
But I imagine, this is the first sort of full game speed these guys are at in months. I would think they'd want to use this as sort of like a
barometer for how they're going to be able to play in the rest of the restart. So
yeah.
The Lakers are the favorites. They're minus 125. The Clippers are plus 105. I think you're right about Paul George. I was watching a little bit of that scrimmage they had the other day, and Paul George looked really good because he's good at basketball. The one thing that's concerning is if having a pulse is a requirement for playing in the NBA restart, then I don't know if Kawhi Leonard's going to be allowed to play. Haha, Kawhi Leonard joke. So the rest of the Clippers, when you're looking at the Clippers, obviously you're going to have to look at Paul George for salary reasons, Kawhi because he's Kawhi Leonard. The one half of the Morris twin duo, if they're low on point guards, I could see them running him as like a point forward kind of situation. Not that he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, but he would be able to fill that role defensively and then also dribble the ball up the court sometimes. But when you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you really don't need a point guard. Because if they're coming down into a set offense, then you just need to start the offense. You don't have to know everybody's job. You just need to bring the ball up the court and know who your first read is, basically. Lou Williams, it's unfortunate that he was at a strip club. I always love playing Lou Williams. I thought that he played.
I always love strip clubs.
I thought that he played the other day. He played in the scrimmage.
The way I'm seeing it, I mean, it looks like he left today. He left the bubble today. I'm reading on DraftKings' update at 12:26 in the afternoon. Williams left the bubble for personal reasons. Apparently, the personal reasons were that he needed to go to a strip club. I believe it was Magic City in Atlanta, which I hear is one of the top ones.
Wait, so how did he get all the way there, though? I'm so confused.
I don't know. I don't know if they just announced his leaving the bubble. Yeah, maybe he might have left yesterday, but there was no reason to alert everyone until like today when they do regular Zoom calls for press briefings and things like that.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine him leaving the bubble, going to a strip club. He was wearing a mask, but he was also within 6 feet of a lot of people.
Yes.
If you catch my drift. So I can't see them sliding him back in.
Maybe that's why he went to the strip club. So the other player that I would like is Reggie Jackson. So like you said, I think Reggie is a good play. Reggie, when he was on the Pistons, when he was on the Thunder, he always had some of these pretty good games. It really comes down to pricing. So at 4,600, all he has to do is score like 30 DraftKings points, and he's not going to kill you. 35, and he's got some pretty good upside. And I think that he could get to something like 40, 45, 50. If this turns into a blowout, or if this is a game that's just not competitive, or the Lakers decide they don't give a shit, then I could see Reggie Jackson having like a game where he's 20 and 10, get some random rebounds. I really don't have an issue with that at all. He might just need to be on the court. That's the other thing. He might just need to be out there. So then the last player that I would talk about from the Clippers is Magruder. Rodney Magruder, when he was on the Heat, he had a lot of good games. He was a starter for the Heat and would put up some performances that justified like a 5,000 price tag, maybe even higher. Did he get up to like 6,000 at one point? I think he did last season. So I think for the Clippers we're all set. For the Lakers, I'll go first on the Lakers. So like I said, minus 125. The thing with the Lakers that you always need to think about is the usage rates of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, because when they're on the court, they're going to touch the ball. When there's a rebound, they're going to grab it. When there's an assist, it's probably one of them. So it's kind of tough to get too excited about anybody else on their team, or at least pinpoint down who it should be. But if I'm looking at the players outside of that, I think that you need to convince yourself of the story that works for those different players. So, for example, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He's another player. When he was on the Pistons, he would have a pretty good game every once in a while. He's a 3-and-D kind of player. J.R. Smith, I don't know if he's actually going to play or not, but he can get hot. I probably am not playing J.R. Smith in the first game back.
Yeah.
Danny Green's a good player. In the first game of the season, he had a monster game against the Clippers, and I think matchup-wise, when you have players like LeBron James, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, there's a lot of like 3-4 sized people on the court at the same time. That means Danny Green is probably going to get one of the smallest defenders from the Clippers, unless the Clippers are like unless they think for some reason Danny Green's going to run the offense. Like I do love that when Kawhi Leonard kind of plays down against a point guard because he'll just swallow him up. Like there's nothing there's nothing a point guard's going to do against Kawhi. But yeah, basically it's going to come down to matchups, and until we know the full rotations, it's going to be tough to know what Danny Green's going to look like. Quinn Cook is always a good option for like garbage time if this devolves into a garbage game. The other Morris twin should be in this game, and then Kyle Kuzma. Those are really the main players that I'm looking at. Like JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, I don't know who's actually going to see the court. What do you think?
Right. Yeah. Look. I was looking at that, trying to decide which of those two I like, and I think it's sort of neither of them, just because that's a sort of pairing that we're going to see in the first couple of games where the minutes go there. So I think I would stay away from both of them. But one of the players you didn't talk about here, which is kind of a big deal. I think I've heard of him. Something James. LeBron James. I get that he's priced at $10.70, he's the most expensive guy on the slate, but like you said, finding that narrative that works. I get that this game doesn't mean a ton to the Lakers, but LeBron's been, he was asked a couple of questions the other day about him winning the MVP and how apparently the NBA voters are going to vote based on everything prior to the restart, prior to the stoppage. So any of these games, it's not going to matter to LeBron. But he seemed kind of like a little jilted because everyone's assuming that Giannis is going to take home the MVP. And I think LeBron seems to do this thing, at least for the last couple of years, where it's getting a little long in the tooth, where people are like, oh, has the king fallen off? Can he do it? And I can see him just sort of coming out in this game, going, give me the ball, having his usage rate be sky high, and, I don't see this really the 10x. Like, you're not going to get super high upside, but we're talking about guys like Reggie Jackson at 4,600, a lot of lower priced guys, where if you built a lineup around them, you could slide LeBron James in there at 10-7, as long as he comes out. The guy's a walking triple double.
Yeah.
And also secondary stats as well. I think he could. There's a high percentage where LeBron James at least makes it worth it for him to be on your roster.
Yeah. So that's a good thing to actually bring up, and this is why Chris is just intuitively pretty good at this kind of stuff, because you have to spend $50,000, and there is a set number of players that you're allowed to play. So there are 8 roster spots. So there is a reason to roster some of these more expensive players at a higher floor, just from like a puzzle piece situation. Like you might have all of your other favorite plays in the other 7 spots, and then you have something like 11,000, 12,000 left in a utility spot or in one random spot, and you can shuffle up the rest of your roster. If LeBron James is the highest scorer out of the top tier guys, he will most likely be in the tournament winning lineups, even if he's not in the quote unquote optimal. But yeah, I think that's a good point as well. So that was the first game, because Chris doesn't play by the rules. He went straight for the second game first. So let's go to the first game second. So the money line is pretty similar in the fact that the favorite is minus 125 and the underdog is 105. I'm going to start with the Pelicans, because the Pelicans, they caught me looking at Twitter, and they were like, oh, I know what can trick Pikel into playing Jahlil Okafor. Let's put out a nice little video of Jahlil taking somebody, I think it was Jarrett Allen, one-on-one, and blowing, he basically crossover through the legs, jab step into the lane, spun off of Jarrett Allen, and then drove it to the hole. But it's pretty good.
Let me cut you off there for a second. I'm nearly sure that Jarrett Allen is not in the bubble. So
was it not Jarrett Allen?
I know. Also, yeah, I know that it's a scrimmage, so the score doesn't matter as much. But it was the fourth quarter of a scrimmage, and they were down 25. So even if Jarrett Allen was, in the bubble, I don't think he would have been on the court at that point. Yeah, I like that. Over, in the time prior to Mike and I starting this video, he's just been sort of getting more and more amped up on Jahlil Okafor, to the point where he's going to start sending him fan mail with a lock of his beard hair.
Who? What? Wait, who was that? Ed Davis? Is Ed Davis on the Nets?
It could have been. Let's go to the tape.
The video quality is really low on this. Honestly, that could have not even been Jahlil Okafor. Who knows at this point? I think it was. Who is that? I can't think of the other players who were on the. I don't even know if Ed Davis is on the Nets right now. That was the first guy that I thought.
I'm not sure if he's still in the NBA.
He's definitely still in the NBA. Relax. Okay, so back to the Pelicans. So on the Pelicans, we have a lot of the usual suspects. So Lonzo Ball, Drew Holiday, Brandon Ingram, Zion. We don't know what's going on with Zion, if he's going to play or not. Then we have Josh Hart and Etwan Moore. If Zion does not play, then we're going to have a lot of limited options for who we can play at the power forward and the center positions. I think Brandon Ingram can play some 4. He would be treated like a stretch 4 on the offense, and then he'd probably be treated like a 3 on defense. Like, he's not going to go spend any time trying to defend like Rudy Gobert. Like, that's not that's not going to happen. So I feel like it's out of necessity, you're going to have somebody like Nico Lamelli or Jackson Hayes on the floor, or Jahlil Okafor. So I know Jahlil is not a good defender, but that's not what we need from Jahlil. He's 3,000. He could do basically anything and be worth it. If he hits 20 points, if he gets to 30, like, he really needs to be able to get to 30 for you to feel good about him. And I think that he has a good chance to do it. If it stays this way and there's a lot of minutes for him to kind of pick up, he's going to be one of my favorite plays on the slate, and I think he's going to be a very popular play as well.
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely think consideration goes Okafor's way. Nico Lamelli at 4,000, I've been liking him a little bit. Back to your point on Brandon Ingram, I know we're talking about this game now, but I know that Ingram has the upside, and the shots are going to have to go somewhere, because it seems like Zion's not going to play. But I think, at least early on in my understanding of all of this, it's hard for me to swallow Brandon Ingram at 8,300 with Paul George at, I believe it was 7,200 or 7,600.
Yeah.
I know that it's only a few $100s in the grand scheme of it, but I think I like going Paul George and also taking that high upside swing on a guy like Jahlil Okafor rather than devoting that much money to Brandon Ingram when I feel like they're comparable players at better numbers.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Brandon Ingram on the Pelicans has shown that he's very consistent with the amount of touches that he gets and like the amount of DraftKings output that he has. And on a 2-game slate, I guess what you really need to take into consideration is how you're going to build your lineup. Like, are you going to have a game stack, or are you just trying to fit in the best plays? So if you're running out multiple lineups, I think that you'd be crazy not to have exposure to Brandon Ingram. So like you would do some highly correlated game stack with a couple players from New Orleans, a few players from Utah, and then just put in a couple players from the second game. Maybe your projections are like the first game is going to be a shootout where it's like 120 to 118, and then the second game is like a blowout that all the starters start sitting, and then you can like sneak a Reggie Jackson in there or something like that because he gets a lot of the garbage time minutes. So that's always a smart thing to do when you're putting together lineups, is kind of think about how you expect both games to go and then picking accordingly.
Right.
But I do agree. I do agree that Paul George will most likely be a better value.
Right.
In most
and then even without going over, now I think we'll slide over a little bit to the Jazz. Even staying in this game, Donovan Mitchell at 7,000 to me. I know that he doesn't get the rebounds like Ingram does. I think there'll be an opportunity for Ingram to do that. But Donovan Mitchell at what is it? $1,300 cheaper, I think, is Donovan Mitchell cheaper than Lonzo Ball. And I know that Ball has the has the assists and the steals, but I don't know. I think I really like Donovan Mitchell at 7,000. Seeing how they come back, try to get their legs under him.
I think that the usage last year from Donovan Mitchell was a lot higher because like they had Ricky Rubio, so I'm not sure why. Like, it doesn't make much sense to me. Like, because the kind of player that Mike Conley is compared to Ricky Rubio, you would think that they're both past first point guards. So unless something must have changed in like their offensive philosophy, because Donovan Mitchell isn't getting the ball passed to him as much, and then he's the person that's going to theoretically like be the facilitator. It's more of like a ball stoppage kind of spot. Because like how else could we explain last year Donovan Mitchell basically averaging like 40 or 50 DraftKings points and being around the $8,000 level, and then now he's at like 7,000. So I think that it probably has something to do with how he's been used this year, or maybe he's just not playing as well this year. I can't really understand it. Like when I looked at the first time that I looked at this, it didn't make sense to me that he was so low. But now, after looking at some of the numbers from their previous games before the shutdown, his price tag starts to make a little bit more sense. But when I look at the Jazz, I think that I want Mike Conley in some rosters. Mike Conley against Lonzo Ball is a good matchup. If Mike Conley is the facilitator and the primary ball handler, then he probably will get Drew Holiday on him instead. And Drew Holiday is a very good defender, so I don't love that. But when you have somebody like Drew Holiday and Mike Conley, if the game starts to blow out a little bit, I could see them kind of turning the defensive intensity down a little bit. Like if Drew Holiday has the scoring responsibilities and the defensive responsibilities, I would think he gives up on the defensive responsibilities a little sooner. But yeah, Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Joe Ingles, and then the rotational players. Not a lot that I love on Utah at all. Ed Davis is on Utah.
I think. There he is.
So he could not possibly be playing for the Nets and getting posterized by Jaleel.
I don't know. It's a small bubble.
True.
But another guy, I think another guy to consider here that we haven't really touched on, aside from you mentioning his name about 30 seconds ago, is Rudy Gobert. I mean, the guy's a walking double-double. And at this point, I'm trying to figure out who on New Orleans is playing defense on. Because if your boy...
Jaleel
Okafor is getting minutes. He's pretty much a turnstile down there. And with Rudy Gobert, I mean, not being the most offensively inclined player, but still, you're not averaging 15 points a game by not trying to put the ball in the hoop at least to some degree. Also, I don't see Okafor out rebounding him, so I think a double is pretty much guaranteed here. At a salary of $7,100, I think I like him as a pretty strong option to. Not kill you, and then if he wants to come back and show, hey, I'm not just that jerk that touched a bunch of microphones and pissed everyone off, I can see him having something close to a 2020 game, which I think really pays off on that $7,000 price tag. Then
that's the one thing I was going to say was the 2020. He's always in 2020 territory, so I think that is a good point. So before we get out of here, we're going to go over some of our favorite plays on the slate. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to run down all my favorite plays, and then Chris has a few that he wants to mention as well. So my favorite stack on the slate is a small one. I like Drew Holiday, and I like Jahlil Okafor. So if this game is relatively high scoring and Zion's not playing and Jahlil Okafor gets 20 minutes, all I need is 20 minutes out of Jahlil Okafor, then I want him as a part of my primary stack. My favorite player overall is either Jahlil Okafor or Reggie Jackson. So if Patrick Beverley and Lou Williams are not playing in the first game, Reggie Jackson's going to get a lot of time on the court. The only thing that scares me is if most of his minutes are with the starting rotation, then he's not going to have a very high usage rate. So some of those minutes could be a little bit less impactful from a DraftKings perspective. But if he gets any time as like the leader of the second rotation or the leader of garbage time or something like that, I think the upside for Reggie Jackson is easily close to 10x. He would need to play a good game in that scenario, but I think that's where I like him. My favorite play to get 5x, so for like cash game value, I think I like Drew Holiday more than anybody else on the slate because he does have the triple-double upside, and he has a pretty good matchup. Like Mike Conley is a little bit smaller than Drew Holiday, and I think that if Mike Conley is the one defending Drew, it doesn't really help his point scoring upside, but I think it does make him even more likely to get some more assists and some rebounds. My favorite 10x play, obviously, Jahlil Okafor. I'm a Jahlil Okafor truther. Never really liked Jahlil Okafor. I didn't want the Knicks to take him in that draft either. But the way it turned out wasn't so great either, with hindsight. Does
it ever?
No, it doesn't. Hawks fan. So my favorite game stack is the Utah and New Orleans game because, like I said, I think that Drew Holiday and Jahlil Okafor are two of my favorite plays, and I think that there are a lot more question marks with the rotations of the Clippers and the Lakers. So I'm not convinced any of those stars are going to be playing a full game. So I'm more likely to get like the secondary pieces from that matchup. My favorite player over 8K, broken record, Drew Holiday. My favorite player between 6 to 8K is Donovan Mitchell. It would be Paul George. Like, you're making a good argument for Paul George, but I'm less concerned with Donovan Mitchell getting out there and playing a full set of minutes than Paul George. And then my best value play overall is Jahlil Okafor. So if Jahlil Okafor goes off, I'm gonna look like really smart. The only problem is that I think everyone's gonna be on Jahlil Okafor.
Okay.
What do you think?
All right, and I think my favorite player it's Reggie Jackson, but it's I think I like him. I like him getting on the court. Like I said, I can't see Mr. Time Management himself, Kawhi Leonard out there too much. I'm gonna give my first little stack here a shot. Although I did put it in the wrong column on our sheet.
Unlucky.
Reggie Jackson, and can you tell me which Morris is on the Clippers?
The first three letters of his name are MAR.
It's Marcus Morris Sr. So I think I like giving both of them a little bit of love. Both of them similarly priced, $4,700 for Morris, $4,600 for Jackson. I think you got both of those guys out there. I can see both of them having a big impact in this game. They're somewhat trusted veterans on this team where, like I said, this is the game where you need guys with a pulse. So I could see them eating up a lot of the opportunities, trying to get into a little bit of a groove. My favorite 5X play, I can't really see, barring injury, I can't see a scenario where Gobert doesn't get at least 35. 70 or 7,100. I think that's a pretty safe bet. Actually, for this one, I don't have a favorite 7X play, but I'll consider it. And no shock here, Reggie Jackson. I like him for the high upside. Just getting the hot hand. Something I've been hearing tossed around a lot is that shooters are going to shoot better in the bubble because there are no fans. There's not a ton of noise. There's not a ton of movement.
Yeah.
So I could see him slipping into a groove pretty easily. Favorite game stack, if I had to pick one, it would be the same one as you, Mike. Jazz Pelicans, just because I feel like the box score on a couple of those Lakers Clippers games earlier this year had both teams in the high 80s, low 90s. And I could see both of them slowing it down a little bit, which I know does go against my Reggie Jackson point. But if I had to pick a game that's going to go a little bit higher, I could see it's the two younger teams, the two more fast-paced teams. So I see it going that way. My favorite player over 8K is King James himself. Like I said, I think he's got a lot to prove, and when he's got that, when he's angrily throwing the, although actually I don't know if they'll let him throw the dust here, or is he going to throw it in a smaller area? Only time will tell. My favorite 6K to 8K player is the aforementioned Paul George, who, as Mike mentioned, I mean, the guy almost won the MVP. Was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I think he was second or third in the MVP voting, and if Kawhi Leonard does take a back seat and only plays his low minutes total, that could be a lot of time on the court for Paul George to sort of just run everything. And my favorite value play, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but Reggie Jackson is my guy.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't think many people are going to get upset with the Reggie Jackson love. It's one of the most obvious spots to look for value and upside. So when you have somebody like that, they're going to be extremely highly owned, like over 50%, over 60% probably in these kinds of contests that we're going to have on the opening night of NBA DraftKings. Well,
and for those of you keeping score at home, that was Mike very subtly saying the thing that I thought about a lot here and tried to make a point about was, quote, obvious.
No, I'm not saying it was obvious. I'm saying the reason that we both said it, we both came to that conclusion independently, and I think if we're both able to figure that one out, then most of the DraftKings websites will also be pushing that narrative as well. So Reggie Jackson is going to be very highly owned. So I'm gonna call an audible right now, and I'm gonna take a look at all of the guards on the slate in the same price range. So Joe Ingles is $1,100 more. Jordan Clarkson is $400 less. I'm not sure how much Jordan Clarkson really plays. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So there's not even really a bunch of people in his price range that you can kind of go to. So maybe you can get leverage with Jordan Clarkson or Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. But that's it for our inaugural Ball In video. Ball In. We got to get some kind of drop where it's like ominous, like we're playing basketball and you just fouled me real hard, and then I brushed all the dirt off my shoulders and shoved the ball into your chest and said Ball In, and then proceeded to beat you down.
I mean, that's not the way that would go.
Okay.
If you tried to get anywhere near the paint, I'm putting you into the ground again until you learn your lesson. But you can have your hypothetical.
Well, that's not really how I wanted to end the first video. Can we try that again, where I win that one? Where I win that, argument?
You're breaking up. No.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
Well,
no.
If that's the case, then I'll just have to stop the video and delete it. So, thanks everybody for watching. Please let us know in the comments section what you liked, what you didn't like, what you thought we were missing, and what Chris should do with his facial hair. Thanks, guys. All right.